Good morning, everyone. I'm Paul Meyer from GAI Insights, and Happy New Year. Welcome to another daily GenAI executive briefing, where we discuss and rate top news items. Our team of AI analysts rate each article as essential, important, or optional for executives and leaders at companies. Today's briefing is sponsored by Custom GPT. Custom GPT is a leading no-code solution for companies to create their own chat GPT with their own data. Their customers include Adobe, Medtronic, Dropbox, MIT, and hundreds of others. Today's discussion will be led by Dave DeLallo. Go ahead, Dave.
Hello. Thanks for having me, and Happy New Year, everybody. So I'm sure the news cycle is still a little slow as people are coming back from vacation, but let's see what we got today. Alkaz, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Okay. So the first update that we have for today is around top generative AI tool categories for 2024. So this article lists down various generative AI tool categories which enterprises can use going into 2024.
All right. John, you want to kick us off on this one? What are your thoughts? Yep, you're on mute. You're on mute, John.
There we go. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes. I rate this thing as important, as one of the other analysts put in the prep doc. I think that the categorization here of, foundation models and services, cloud, AI platforms, and so forth is a useful way to think of both what you're working with and how to improve it.
Yep. I think we lost you a little bit, but we got the gist.
Oh, okay.
Anybody else have any thoughts on that, whether this is important or... I don't think anybody probably feels essential, but...
Paul seems to think optional. You want to say, well, I thought it was important as well, but what do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I think the challenge. I'm just ornery today. I mean, I think that it's so broad. Top generative AI tools. I think that we need no more precision. Are they tools for individual productivity? Are they tools for process automation with Gen AI? I don't feel strongly. I just felt that they could have been more precise.
I'll say why I thought it was important. It's like there are so many tools out there, and it's nice to see some thought leadership around how to start sort of putting that landscape into boxes. It's probably one of the first times where I've seen someone trying to take an approach to that. And even just as I go through the list, it made sense to me how these are all really very different classes of tools. And so I thought it was a worthwhile sort of thought exercise to just think through that concept.
Yep. I'd go with important again. I am on the fence at one level because it's a fairly simplistic approach. But on the other hand, simplicity is often good. And at least it's a stab at thinking about some things. I viewed it as helpful for executives as a simple checklist. Oh, at least am I aware of all these categories? And things like cost optimization, most people aren't even thinking about yet. So it's good to get those on the radar. And it's a short article. So my value for time was, this is important.
Tim, and one item for support in your statement back in our conference last September, I think we may have mentioned before, Liz it was a throwaway slide. She just said, here's leading tools for PowerPoint creation. It was just like 6 or 8. And when she put that up, at least half, if not 3/4 of the phones went up in the audience and took a picture. So I think that is reinforcing your notion that even though we think about this 24/7, a lot of people are just looking for basic guidance.
Yeah. And maybe just when we put into our newsletter what this is about, to your point, Paul, I had expected when I saw the title that this would be tools like for productivity, but these are tools for somebody building a tool or somebody building an application, which is definitely helpful. All right. Sounds like we are aligned on important. What do you got next, Ankash?
Okay, the next one is from ultrasonic brain treatment. So there is a new simulation technique that scientists have generated through generative AI, which lowers the barrier to ultrasonic brain treatment.
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing I'm going to go to you, Tim, because I feel like you're always our medical, biological guru. But I just thought it was interesting that they were using generative adversarial networks, since we keep hearing about, the shiny new tool that is LLMs, but this one is using a different type of generative technology that's been around a little longer. And personally, I had never heard of this treatment. I guess it's for Parkinson's, which is fantastic. But Tim, what were your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I could talk about this for hours. Ultrasonic treatments have exploded, and they're going to continue to explode. They're not only used in brains, they're used on most parts of the body at this point. And this is really interesting, both because of the advancement and because of the technology being used here in generative AI. So people have mostly think of generative AI as ChatGPT, but they also do recognize DALL-E and Midjourney, other image generators. And those image generators and image processors tend to use different technologies. Diffusion and this one here, generative adversarial networks, are the most common. So they're really focused on images. But the big idea here, I think there are two big ideas. One, again, I'm going to pound the table on this hard. 2024, we are going to see serious deployments of this stuff in production in critical areas. And I think this is going to be something like that. So this is, you can't get more serious than brain surgery, basically. And they're going to use this stuff, I think, before the year is out, is my guess. It's not there yet, but I think they're going to use it before the year is out. And the other is just the ability of the exponential curve to continue driving these things towards production, because the cost and capabilities are increasing so rapidly. So the ability of this thing to not only process, but process in real time, that is what's always been hard with imaging technologies. And I can tell you lots of stories about that going back 50 years almost. That is one of the biggest problems, is everything has to be pre-planned. And this doesn't require pre-planning, because the image is being updated in real time. The information is being updated in real time, even using the generative AI technique. And that means that the clinician can basically just point the ultrasound and adjust on the fly. And that's hugely valuable. So I rate this as important in general because of those two ideas, essential for anybody in the general clinical treatment area.
All right. Any other thoughts?
I just highlight the real-time update, Tim. It's stunning.
I just had one thought, the verification too, as well, with the real time. So it's almost like, I don't know that I want to go with its, reducing hallucinations and use that terminology, but the verification of it in the real time, I think, is what's also important with this one.
All right. Sounds like we'll go with important.
I'll just comment that this is starting to feel like something out of science fiction, like Star Trek. They had the little healers, the little coders, like ultrasonic. Like, it's incredible. Yeah, very cool stuff.
Very cool. All right, what's next?
Okay. The next one is again from the healthcare field. So basically, these are examples of EHR vendors using GenAI in clinical workflows.
All right. I thought it was interesting to see this recap of all the vendors. I always just think of Epic when I think of EHR, because they're so pervasive. But this was a nice summary of what others are doing. I mean, I guess one thing that I noted, in contrast to the kind of very transformational, I would say, use case we just read, this one's obviously a little more basic. You see people using it for text summarizing, generating notes, etc. But it's good to see the progress. What do you guys think? What do you think, Adam?
I was on the fence between optional and important. There's a few good use cases here, but I feel like we could almost flag them as use cases. But I also think it's important if you look at ways that you can sort of extrapolate some of these use cases across other verticals. So I was on the fence between those two.
Yeah, they were kind of the most basic use cases for the moment, which made me feel optional about
Lean
it.
towards optional, yeah.
But
Yeah.
then in a way, I was like, well, maybe that's important to know that that's where we are in the world of.
There's Paul's vote.
What was your Paul? I missed it.
Optional.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, Paul, we got to get you a new art director.
Yes.
Hey, I was on the board of a company called Clinical Information Advantage Incorporated back in the 90s where we did this stuff, and now it's just a feature. Yeah, no, look, if Epic were a publicly traded company, I'd go buy their stock because they're so good. Talk about lock-in. We talked about before about how if you're not careful, the LLMs will lock you in. That they're even more of a lock-in than a cloud provider, maybe. So Epic is just so good at landing and expanding and just elbows high, keep everybody else out of these provider organizations. They talk a good game about being an open platform, and they are just as proprietary and brutal as any organization out there. So God love them.
Yeah, I think the only reason I would argue important, John, is sort of one of your ideas, which is I think this is important if you're in the clinical field. This is going to be really important at a first order because so much time spent on documentation. But the second order, which is your idea, John, is this is, I think, going to be transformative over time, because what will happen is the amount of time people spend doing crap work will go way down, and the amount of interaction with patients is going to go way up, and that's going to be transformative to me.
Yeah, and the ambient collection of notes and things like that, which is mentioned in this, is huge.
Yeah.
Right? Doctor doesn't even have to go to the keyboard. We've all been to a doctor's appointment, where you just sit in front of the machine. That's not going to happen, right? It's going to be ambient and then reviewed. Now, no, but I just think it's a nothing burger in terms of, anybody who's in this field already knows what's going on here, and anybody's following
use cases. So in general, if you're looking for, again, proof that this stuff is real and going to be used in real life, these are EHRs in clinical application. Now they're administrative functions of those EHRs, so they're not in critical care decisions, but nevertheless, these are in production.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would say one thing that I thought of as a potential patient was the use of it to I forget which company in the list was using it, but using it to provide the doctor with a summary of your last visit or of your charts and such. And I was in my mind thinking about when you use these tools, a lot of times it misses important stuff or it aggregates things to such a high level that I'm hoping there's a human in the loop with checking those summaries and making sure that they are pulling up all the relevant information, because I would foresee, a doctor not getting something really vital about your health as he or she is about to, treat you. So,
well, with our sales pitch at Amicus, Clinical Information Advantage Incorporated, which is the original name, was, hey, look, there's two things. First of all, it's the productivity of the doctor in the system, but the other thing is 80% of the cost comes from the end of the doctor's pen, which is whatever the doctor orders or put you on a path of or so forth, directs a huge amount of cost. So if you get it right at the pen, you get it right every place else. So anyway, yes, to your point, David, this is huge.
Just one other comment as well. I still believe it's optional. I think it's stunning.
I do too.
We continue to find healthcare and leading. I think part of this was just Zoom exploding and showing everyone that all the scaredy cats in healthcare don't have to be scared of technology because of HIPAA. And the doctors are never going back to 5 days in the office. And we're, Tim, I think 5 years ago, the lawyers would be screaming, HIPAA, HIPAA, HIPAA. The payers aren't paying us to do this. And it's a sea change. And we're seeing it both in our conference and the amount of healthcare customers contacting us.
One other little note, any doctor I've been to, most of them anyways, hate these systems, right? They hate using them. They find them laborious. So hopefully this is a way that's going to make it a little easier to use, and maybe it will increase adoption, or at least using it more effectively by the doctors. I don't know. We talked about this a lot to now call it optional, but I guess we're calling it optional.
Optional.
Next.
Let's keep driving.
Okay. The next one is more of a research paper, which talks about the hallucinations that LLMs generate and how you can sort of modify your techniques of generating content to make sure that you are not affected by those hallucinations.
All right. Being that I'm not a morning person, I'm going to admit that I didn't make it through this, but I love this term bot shit. Every time I see it, I chuckle. So I will defer to Amanda. What do you got on this one? Did you read it?
So I skimmed it, and I to your point, I think the concept is good. There's that chart in there that kind of goes through like with data collection, preprocessing, tokenization, so some, I guess, basic terms and things like that. But again, it's research, so for me, it's optional because it's long. So I don't know how many of our listeners are really going to go out there and really spend the time to go through this, first thing in the morning. So for me, this is an optional one.
Yeah. Were there any aspects of it, John? It looked like you maybe read this a little bit more closely than I did. Is there like a page that jumps out at you that you feel like, oh, well, maybe this is something useful?
No, this just strike me as a academic entry it's a classification schema, and I don't think it's that relevant to business.
I can make it important.
Excellent.
Oh,
Yes.
What a rebel.
Yeah, no,
yes.
what it's important is it highlights a really great use case of how you can use the build GPT functionality. So I downloaded the PDF and I already made like a custom ChatGPT bot that you can chat with, and I put the link to it on LinkedIn in the conversation, and I'll post it on X as well under the live stream there. So you can go chat with a GPT about this right now. If you look, it's about 3 lines from the bottom of the abstract. It talks about authenticated, autonomous, automated, and augmented as different modes in a framework. And so exploring that, I think, is worthwhile. It starts to think about the more subtle interactions about where you can use GPT and where or LLMs and where you can really rely on them, and how you judge both the veracity of the information as well as the importance of the veracity of that information. So it's a worthwhile endeavor to chat with the bot, probably not to read the article.
Okay, so we'll say the article is optional, but playing with your tool is
Playing with my GPT is important.
And I'll make the continued. I got to write this article. I just increasingly getting so frustrated with the term hallucination. I think Tim, you got me. The probabilistic outcome is the right term. Hallucination implies errors. These errors are not bugs; they're designed-in features.
Paul, in this article, it says they refer to ignorance, miscalibration, routinization, and black boxing. So there's even more subtlety around sort of the ways that these things get mischaracterized.
Right. Or just generally bot shit versus bullshit. So,
yeah, bot shit.
Which has been studied in business, and actually, I still say the most important reason you need to understand more about technology than most executives do is so you can throw the bullshit flag.
+1.
the bot shit flag.
Next.
Well, this is a different kind because but I agree. I'm surprised, John, you don't like it more because it's got the classic 2x2 management matrix, and it's not even half bad. But it is pretty much repetitive of stuff that's already done. If you can't figure out the veracity versus the validation, then you probably are in trouble in your position in the first place.
All right. We're going with optional, but play with Adam's tool. And we got one more. Ankaj.
The next one is from GitHub. So GitHub had recently announced the Copilot chat, and now it is generally available.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's okay. That's great that it's generally available. Perhaps that is essential to know, but the article itself, maybe not. Anyway,
I'd go for optional. I think it's interesting, how accustomed we've gotten to, predatory economic behavior by the incumbent. So what I mean by that is this says, that basically Microsoft is subsidizing, these customers, which, when I was a kid, that used to be an issue for antitrust, right? When you're using cross market subsidy to keep, competition down, and that's what's going on here. And they're just completely open about it. It's like, yeah, sure, whatever. Which I think just gives us a state of just how much market power and political power these platform companies have.
Yeah, I think you can go all the way back to Google or even before, because what tech companies have discovered in the past 25 years is that syndication of content is the most profitable business model pretty much ever invented. I mean, these guys' net margins are unbelievable. So they generate so much cash that they can sit around for years gathering investor funds and saying, well, eventually we'll figure out how to monetize this syndication. But in the meanwhile, we'll just subsidize the heck out of it and dominate the market. So Google did that for many years before they adopted an ad model.
Yeah, no, it's pretty stunning. And well, it goes back to this, beautiful dance that the neocons have had of turning antitrust from being about two things, which is organizations having, political power and consumer harm, to just consumer harm. So anyway,
and John, just to highlight, remember, Netscape got blown out of the water because of Microsoft cross subsidizing and free browser, and Amazon's subsidizing their crushing of Walmart, and it's not even a discussion item.
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
Very interesting. All right, I think that's it for today. So thanks for joining everybody, and we will see you same time tomorrow.
Thank you. Happy New Year, everyone. Thank you.
Happy New Year.